Let me start by being grateful. You could be anywhere in the world right now, almost quite literally, but here you are with me, however fortunate or unfortunate that might be. And I thought after quite some time of doing this, and after quite some time of being alive on this earth, it was time for me to discuss gratitude with you and why I think it is one of the most fundamentally powerful topics and practices that you can and should. Very rarely do I use the word should, but we all should be grateful. And I want to talk about why today. Firstly, I think there's some scenarios that we'll touch on that we might be in one way or another, high level. And then I think once we can understand where we're at somewhat high level, we can begin to understand and appreciate the concept of gratitude and why I think it's a practice that you should adopt every day in a very rudimentary and fundamental way. So, if you've ever watched or if you've ever touched on or researched gratitude and you're figuring out how to implement it into your life, I too have done the same. A monstrous amount of research, my own self deep work on gratitude. I have a specific practice, but I want to talk about really why you should do it, how you should do it, and ultimately what I believe is the easiest takeaway to have you apply it and scale it in your life. So let's consider that gratitude at its most fundamental level is for you to be grateful and thankful, either by receiving or showing thanks, or maybe simultaneously doing it, receiving and showing for whatever it is you can be grateful for. And yes, fundamentally also, when you really put it into perspective, there is always something to be grateful for. There is always something to be grateful for. And I'll say it again for effect. There is never not something that you can find to be grateful for, whatever the situation you're in. And I get it. Some situations are more difficult. So let's consider where you might be. I think at its worst in life, life offers a lot of dark and uncomfortable places and spaces. And so some of us might be going through some things that are unspeakable, that no one should have to go through. But unfortunately, things like that do occur in life. Some scary, dark, unfortunate things happen. I've gone through my own level of misfortunes, certainly not the most egregious, but certainly some things where you're just like, man, why is this happening to me? So there's that. There's also the reality around what I believe is the strongest reason for us to find some gratitude, which is most of us are so over inundated with life and so over inundated with the social experience of life. And this is, of course, you hear social, you might mentally drift off into or consider social media or any sort of social experience in that way. And that's relative in the overarching regard of we're all socially accessible in some capacity really quickly and really broadly. Like if you really take any sort of time to consider what we are technologically, don't just think of like social media, what it exposes you to. The life that we have today, the over inundation of abundance is massively, massively powerful in ways that I'm learning. And if you do some research, we can't really put a metric or data on. Like this oversaturation of richness, this oversaturation of exposure, this super hyper connected real time world, it has a really powerful impact on how we perceive ourselves. It has an impact on how we go about ourselves and ultimately how we move as a people, especially individually. So there is that truth and reality, which I'll get into as well, and how gratitude can help us kind of kind of manage that, right? Because the reality is this: the marketing machine that is the world is not going away. And this fast paced approach to over inundation and oversaturation of material abundance in all social levels and facets is not going away. It's only going to probably get more expansive. They're only going to continue to fund it deeper. And there's someone right now thinking of ways to make it even more powerful for some sort of endeavor that makes sense for whomever's trying to make it more powerful. So there's that. And I digress because I could probably talk about that for the next 38 hours. So there's a couple of scenarios, right? Deep, dark, unfortunate, over inundation socially, and us trying to fit in with what we see constantly, and us trying to get more, get more, get more, get more. Then I believe there's, and I'll keep it to three kind of high level components. Then there's the reality to, because of where it's dark, because of this over inundation, because of us trying to aspire, a lot of us too could be in a situation where we're really putting in what we might believe is max effort. We're really maybe even trying to go against the grain. We're putting in some sort of focused, concentrated effort into having a specific life materialize for ourselves. And those of us who are going through this process, I don't even know that I need to touch on it more than that. You know what it is. There's a certain level of grind and a certain level of discipline and a certain level of intention that a lot of us are now either in the process of expanding on, expounding on, and maybe even stuck in the middle somewhere. Some of us are just starting it. Some of us are further along. But there's this really, I don't want to say trendy, but there's this hyper focus around really attaining a certain level of actualization in yourself that we as self-improvement, self-love, self-evolution, all those things, there's the reality that a lot of us are in that space in some capacity, and there's varying levels of commitment. Some of us, it's just the way it is. Some of us are much more committed and see a higher and grander version. Some of us are somewhere in the middle, and some of us, we don't really have that big of a dream per se. We just know that we're in some sort of path. That's just the reality and the realization of life, right? So in and around those three areas, and depending on which one of those, and maybe you're in all three, right? Maybe you're in a super difficult, unfortunate situation, plus you're somehow over inundated with what society's telling you should be, and you're on your own individual grind, and that's hard. Gratitude in all these areas is supremely important. And I'll get into how you can practice this very easily and some of the fundamentals around what you should do to allow this to kind of naturally be a thing. Because I believe the more you practice gratitude, the more it becomes a very natural thing and you don't have to think about it. That's the biggest thing we can always do on the Do You rules, is make something so ingrained into our process and our habitual nature that it's just part of us. So we're going to talk about how we make gratitude part of us. But let's agree that when up against any one of these scenarios, right? The difficulties we talked about, the unspeakables, the social pressures, or the grit, the grind of the actualization. At some point, I don't know when, I don't know how, but it's just the nature of how we are. When faced with this level of adversity and what you could consider it's friction, it's emotional friction, it's physical friction, it's mental friction, it's some sort of difficulty. When faced with it, we find ourselves beginning to question the types of things that begin to question when the thoughts start to permeate in our mind, right? And that is certainly what makes it difficult to overcome any one of these obstacles and scenarios. So if you can insert gratitude and agree that, I think I said it at some point, I might have started with it, that there is always a reason to be grateful, then sort of the what would be the sort of the law. I've talked about the law of polarity before, but the opposite. If you take the extreme of what you're going up against in the most difficult of situations, you can be grateful that I'm alive. Like no matter what you're experiencing in the worst, you can be grateful that, okay, I have breath. I can try. I can at least give effort today, right? And we're talking again about the reality that whether you want to agree or not, there's or at least fundamentally with what I'm saying, you can find a reason to be grateful. You can always find a reason to be grateful or not. If you don't want to, fine, then stay ungrateful, whatever. But but however dark it is, there's always a light. When you're and if that's the premise, then scale that against any of the scenarios you might be in. When you're over inundated socially and you're seeing things that you think you want, and you're seeing a lifestyle that you think you want, and you look around and you don't have that lifestyle, what can you be grateful for? Right? When you're pursuing a dream, when you're up against the grit and the grind of the everyday life and the mundane routine of trying to become actualized, when you're repeating process over and over and over, when you're in this disciplined, boring, ugly, just repeated process of hardship, of self-hardship, because any sort of actualization, if you haven't experienced it or if you're not going on it, that's what it comes down to. That you versus you scenario, it's you're going to run up against situations where you start to question, why am I doing this? It comes back to gratitude, right? It comes back to being grateful. At least I can. At least I have the opportunity to be grateful. So regardless of where you're at, you can certainly look at the opposite of what you're doing as far as it being difficult and simply marry it with a level of gratitude. Whatever pain it is, there's a reason to be grateful. Pick one, anyone, right? So there's that. So we can agree to that. We know we can be grateful. Here's why I think it's paramount to any situation you're in, right? Essentially, what you want to use gratitude for is a reward system. Gratitude becomes the reward because wherever you are in any one of these situations, the reason you want to use and leverage gratitude is so you can feel good about what's going on. Imagine that. That the idea of no matter what the adversity is, no matter what the difficulty and the obstacle, I need to be and feel rewarded somehow. Otherwise, I won't want to keep going. Otherwise, I will want to stop. Otherwise, I will want to quit. And inevitably and unfortunately, when we find ourselves having difficulties growing, in some capacity, we've stopped, we're preventing ourselves, or we've been prevented, and ultimately we quit. That's unfortunate, but that's just the reality of life. So gratitude becomes the reward that whatever situation I'm in, I can lock in and be grateful that I have a situation and that if I figure out a solution, I can find a way out, whatever the situation is, and I reward myself through gratitude. And the easiest way to make gratitude a reward system is to take 5 minutes minimum out of your day every day. Same place, same time, every time. Don't skip it. Don't miss it. It's the easiest thing to do. For me, you can wake up. As soon as you wake up, that starts your gratitude practice. I'm alive. Thank God. I'm grateful because one day that won't happen. And so if you can figure that every day, same time, same place, you spend 5 minutes on being grateful, what's going to happen is you'll find same place, same time every day, you're all of a sudden going to feel this rush of gratitude. You can literally program and configure yourself to emotionally experience gratitude for 5 minutes a day, every day, if you do it at the same place, same time. So just imagine that more than anything, if you're not experiencing that today, you'll give yourself 5 minutes of gratitude, and that's going to feel great. And ultimately, in order for you to feel grateful, you're going to have to start identifying what you're grateful for. So thankfully and fortunately, most of us aren't in a situation where it's really, 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 really bad and unfortunate. We're mostly just over inundated with what we're trying to experience socially, or we're on this crazy grind where we're trying to be better for ourselves anyway. So what is there for you to be grateful for? What can you identify as being, as having a level of gratitude for in your life? And I'm not going to tell you what it is. Some of the things are obvious. Look around you, all around you. We live in abundance. Pick something, anything. You have heat, you have a bed to sleep in, you have food to eat. It gets that basic and rudimentary. Why? There's always something to be grateful for. And when you can start to identify and fix your brain on finding reasons to be grateful, guess what happens? You keep finding more and more reasons to be grateful. The logic is as simple as it can be. And now the significance and the importance of doing this same time every day is that you will not only emotionally start to experience it same time every day, but your brain will start to move you towards, oh, at this time, we need to be grateful. And then what do you think happens? Your brain and your thoughts and your mind start to think of, well, why are we grateful? And then when you start to experience all these better and greater and grander thoughts about why you should be grateful, why you should be thankful, why you are fortunate, and you have same place every time, when you move away and you go into the rest of your day, your brain, your mind, your consciousness will subconsciously and very subtly start to highlight things and reasons. Hey, look, I'm grateful for this. If for no other reason than tomorrow, when we sit down and we go through our practice, I don't want to be there with nothing. Or I don't want to, and because this will happen too. You can only be grateful for the same things, but for so long. So your mind will start to highlight all the little, medium, and big reasons why you are, why you should, and why we can be grateful. And if that's not a reason enough to adopt it, to apply it, and to allow it to enhance your life experience, I don't know what else to tell you. Maybe you're just not designed to be grateful, but I doubt that because it's in all of us. Change your mind, change your life. I am who I say I am. Do you and stay rich.